Since the horrific, murderous attack on Friday by a crazed jihadist, there's one thing that I've noticed has been completely absent from the discourse and from the discussion on all the news media and all the rest of it. And that discussion is why? And that discussion is not just why, but what? What drives young Muslim men to take knives, machetes, whatever it is, and attack innocent people? And it's a discussion that we're not allowed to have anymore. And in fact, I'm making this video this morning, I'm thinking, is this video going to cost me my YouTube channel? Doesn't really matter, I don't make any money out of it. But it's still a good way of talking to the world about what's important to us. So what and why? What drives this young Muslim man to first of all want to blow up this London Stock Exchange? And secondly, when he's supposedly been de-radicalised, he's in a seminar to talk about creative writing, and suddenly pulls out knives and threatens to blow the place up and then starts killing people. What pushes a young Muslim man to do that? And the reality is, and Lord Pearson has been talking about this for years and saying, just let's have a conversation. Let's talk about Islam. And I firmly believe that this book is what inspires young Muslim men to go out and commit these savage acts. It's not a misinterpretation of the book, it's what the book teaches. Also, the life of the author of the book. When you look at the life story as reported in the seerah, the biography of Muhammad, you look at the various hadiths, and then you look at how people have interpreted the life of Muhammad and how people have done their best to emulate and follow what Muhammad did. It gives a very, very clear reason why people can justify barbarous attacks against innocent civilians, against non-Muslims, or against people that they consider to be apostates, infidels, or enemies of Islam. And of course, when it comes to these jihadists, Chowdhury's lot, everybody that doesn't agree with their doctrine is an enemy of Islam. So they've got what the military would call a target-enriched environment. They can kill anybody and justify it, and find a hadith or a verse in the Quran to justify what they've just done. And of course, then, because of the absolute ignorance of Western civilization, of its history, and because of the absolute ignorance among the British establishment of Christian doctrine and biblical literacy, there's no biblical literacy in the general population of the United Kingdom. That's a great shame and a great tragedy, because then you get this crazy argument, well, there's lots of violent stuff in the Bible. Quite so. The Bible's a book of history, a book of narrative, a book of poetry, a book of prophecy. Of course there's violent stuff in there. It spans thousands of years. Whereas the Quran is a book of instruction. The life of Muhammad is he's supposed to be, according to the Muslims, Muhammad is the perfect man. He's the one that every single Muslim should emulate. Whereas in Christianity, Jesus Christ is the perfect man and the man that everybody should emulate. The problem is nobody has ever emulated or imitated the life of Christ. None of us, not a single one of us. We're all completely flawed and can't do it. But the reality is, if you emulate Muhammad and you copy Muhammad's life to a T, you're not going to have a problem with taking a wife that's 6 years old and consummating that marriage when she's 9 years old. That's what the sources tell us that Muhammad did. That's just a theological fact, or a fact of history, if the story of his life is historically accurate. You're not going to have a problem with anti-Semitism if you emulate Muhammad. Remember what he did? Killed 500 to 600 Jewish men and boys. You're not going to have a problem with the verses of the sword. You're not going to have a problem with killing, because if your book justifies killing and justifies killing the unbeliever, slay them where you find them. If your book justifies that, you're not going to have a problem with doing that if you genuinely believe in that religion. And one of the interesting things about this jihadist that was thankfully killed on London Bridge, and you know, another thing about this whole incident, I've already seen the left, and think about this, if anybody watching this video even contemplates voting Labour, think about this. The left are already calling for an investigation into why the police officer shot this murderous psychopath on London Bridge that actually had something looking like a suicide bomb strapped to his chest. And believe you me, these police officers will have to look over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Just ask any soldier that shot anybody in Northern Ireland. They will come after you. The left and the Muslim apologists will come after you and chase you down until they get you into a court of law. Unless something radically changes in this country. And don't think the Conservatives are going to protect you either, because they ain't. But getting back to the issue, why these people do what they do. Well, they absolutely justify it theologically from the Quran, the Hadith, from Sharia law. And this information is out there. It's in the public domain. You can get books like The Reliance of the Traveller, which is basically a Sharia law manual. It's quite an expensive book, but boy, does that open your eyes to the fact that what is happening today is not a perversion of Islam. What is happening today is an interpretation of Islam. It's not the only interpretation, but it is an interpretation of Islam. And I want to recommend another book. If you can see that, Understand Islam in Under an Hour, by Farouk bin al-Ashraf. And it's a very, very short book that explains very concisely why Islam and Western civilization are not compatible. And they're not. It's as simple as that. So, can we have the conversation about Islam? That's what Lord Pearson's been talking about. Can we look at the Quran and go to our Muslim friends and say, okay, you're a peaceful Muslim, and most Muslims are peaceful, thankfully. Most Muslims in the West are peaceful. And can we go to our Muslim friends and say, why is this in the Quran? What does it mean? We know what it means, but we want to challenge them and say, why does your text teach that war in the name of your religion is not the last resort, but it is a duty? It is a duty, and it is the way that your religion has dominated the world, or dominated the areas that it's been prominent in for the past 1400 years. And if that's the case, if Islam is dangerous, if its theology and its ideology is dangerous, then surely the establishment, the Western governments, the British establishment, should be doing a lot more to challenge it than they are. But of course, the problem is, and this is for another video, the problem is the governments of the West have colluded with some of the most despotic, fundamentalist Islamic states on the planet. And I'm talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about Qatar. I'm talking about Pakistan. They've colluded with them. They're in cahoots with them. They're arming them. They're helping them. And like I say, that's for another video. And again, there's a lot of documentary or documented information that our security services and even some of our special forces have trained jihadists to take part in these conflicts against the dictatorships of the Middle East. And that needs to be talked about as well. And that doctrine needs to be questioned. And the people who have involved our forces in training people who have gone on to be jihadists and who have committed atrocities, those people need to be called to account. And I'm talking people in the highest echelons of government and the highest echelons of the civil service. Because not only is there betrayal of Brexit treason, but the betrayal of Western values and Western civilization to jihadists is worse than treason. And it really means that they're complicit in war crimes in the Middle East. So that's my take on what's been happening in London. We need to look at this. We need to talk about this. We need to be honest and have an honest debate about the problems that are found within the texts of Islam, within the traditions of Islam, and within the jurisprudence of Islam. See you all soon.